With the Miller's prologue, the scheme of the Canterbury Tales breaks down, or rather Chaucer pretends that the routine breaks down. They're supposed to be telling stories in order more or less of the character's social precedence, and so that has started out okay. The knight has gone first. He's the most socially, he's the highest member, he's the socially highest standing member of the Pilgrims. He goes first. He tells a characteristically high class story about knights and heroes in ancient Thebes, which is long and lofty, and you're free to read it, though it hasn't been assigned. The host enjoys this enormously and asks the monk, the highest standing male next in line of social precedence, to tell the next story, but gets interrupted by the miller who's drunk, who wants to tell a filthy story, and people try to talk him out of it, but he can't, because he is, I'm going to use the Middle English here, drunka. And then there are two protests, or two excuses made before the Miller's tale begins. And if these protests don't whet your appetite to read, you're missing something here. We keep telling you, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, this story is so dirty and churlish, which is our way of saying, hey, here comes a really dirty, churlish, funny story. Get ready, kids. First, the Miller himself makes an excuse for the story he's going to tell. Don't blame me. Don't blame me. Don't blame me. What does he say here? Oh, that's right. Now hearkeneth, quoth the miller, Allah and Soma. But first I make a protestation. That I am drunka, I know it by my sound. That I am drunka, I know it by my soon. I want to make a protestation. I know I am drunk. I hear it. I know it by my sound. I can tell. How do you know I'm drunk? I can hear it. Definitely, I am drunk. I talk like I'm drunk. And therefore, that if I misspeak or say, blame it on the ale of Southwark. Southwark, I pray. Don't blame me. Blame the nice Southwark ale, baby. Blame Elliot Ness Lager. It's a great excuse. Don't blame me. I'm drunk. Now I'm going to tell the story, knowing full well, if you know you're drunk, you know you can stop talking. This is a mock excuse. It's an excuse to take away the blame and allow yourself to get away with things. I'm so drunk. Don't pay any attention to what I say. You know you could stop talking. Now that's a good excuse, but not as clever as the excuse Chaucer is going to come up with. At the end of the Miller's prologue, we return to the gambit he's used in the general prologue, which is to say, don't blame me, guys. It's just my character talking. But as I said in one of the videos in the general prologue, he made up the character. He writes their dialogue. The characters talk. He's pretending to be quoting these characters whom he made up. It's like having A.A. Milne tell you not to blame him, that Winnie the Pooh has a filthy mouth. If filthy words come out of Winnie the Pooh's mouth, it's because A.A. Milne put them there, and aren't we grateful he didn't? Aren't we grateful that Chaucer did put some filthy words in the Miller's mouth? But here comes the excuse, which I'm going to modernize. What should I more saying, but that this Miller, he know that his words for no man forbear. Then what can I say except this Miller, he wouldn't forbear his words for anybody, for no man. And therefore, every gentle wight, I pray, for God's love, deemeth not that I say of evil intent, but that I must rehearse their tales, all be they better or worse. For God's love deemeth not that I say of evil intent, but that I moot rehearse her tales, all be they better or worse, or else false in some of my matera, or I'd be lying. I just get a quote. Otherwise, I'd be a liar. I'd falsify some of my material. No. And therefore, whoso listeth not Yahira, doesn't want to hear it, turn over the leaf. Just turn the page. You don't like dirty stories? Turn the page, baby. And choose another tale. Choose another tale. Turn the page. Pick another story. For he shall find enough, great and small, of historical things that touches gentleness. Gentleness, gentility is going to factor in a big way in the life of Bathstone. And also morality and holiness. Blameth not me, if that ye choose amiss. Hey man, I put a lot of different kinds of books in here, and if you chose the dirty tales, don't blame me that you picked the wrong one. I put the moral stories in here for you, that you read the smutty dirty joke. Who's to blame there? Okay, that's right. Who wrote it? Jeffrey. Who put it in the book? Come on, don't blame us. And certainly don't blame the miller. You made the miller up. The miller is a churl. You know a well of this. The miller's a churl. You know it. So was the Reva and other many mo. And harlotry they told in both the 12. Okay, that's great. Harlotry, dirty jokes. Here we come. And yeah, this is a story with some farting, with some literal kissing of butts, with a butt being burned with a red hot farm element. It's a coulter. It's the kind of turf cutter on a plowshare. It's a red. It's a very sharp piece of farm metal that's been heated red hot to give Handy Nicholas a surprise. Yeah, so that happens. This is a kind of tale called the Fabliaux. It's a kind of jokey, down-home. Again, the class system matters here. The miller tells this kind of tale in Chaucer's scheme because he's a churl, and this is a churlish tale. This is a commoner's kind of tale. Is that true? Well, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the tale. Geoffrey Chaucer, who's a courtier, who hangs out at court, who comes from the merchant classes, but has been hanging out with dukes and princes as a servant for pretty much his whole adult life. So, and part of his audience are gentlefolk. They enjoy this story too. It is an enduring fiction that these dirty jokes and smutty stories are just for the lower classes. This one was written primarily for the upper classes. The initial primary audience for the Canterbury Tales, which circulated only in handwritten manuscript because there were no printing presses, is an upper class audience. Upper class people like this too. But it's a story that's fit for the lower classes or the middle classes. And so it's also set among the middle classes with John the carpenter and his wife, Alison, which is at this point it's a commoner's name, it's a peasant lady name, it's a peasant woman's name, it's a village. It's Alison around the block. She's a village girl. And our clerk of Oxford. You may notice a couple of things. The reeve is a carpenter. The reeve in the frame story has just been trying to tell the miller to stop talking, and the miller won't. And then the story the miller tells pokes fun at a carpenter whose wife cheats on him and makes him a fool and humiliates him in the ideology of the story. There's a clerk. So actually, what's starting to happen with the Miller's Tale is the stories themselves are starting to have content that refers back to the frame story, as the narrators who come from the frame story use the stories they tell to kind of poke at each other. The miller makes the sucker in this story, the old husband with the young wife who cheats on him, makes him a carpenter to kind of poke at the reeve because the reeve's a carpenter. Am I making this up? Well, if I'm imagining it, so is the reeve, because right after the story ends, the reeve tells a story trying to do a little payback and make it about a miller. I also point out the unfaithful wife's name, Alison, which is the same name as our wife of Bath. So we've got a sexually voracious commoner woman in the frame story, and the miller has made his adulterous commoner lady. In his story, someone with the same name. This is not an accident either. And Hendy Nicholas is a clerk from Oxenford And the Clerk of Oxenford doesn't seem to protest against this story, though it doesn't seem to be the kind of thing he usually himself would get up to, but so it goes. We have the standard, we have a standard kind of traditional comedy folktale trope: older husband, younger, beautiful, sexy wife. She's going to cheat on him. It's only a matter of time. He has a boarder who's a clerk, a kind of scholar at Oxford University, who plays this trick on him with astrology, pretending to go in a trance to have a prediction that, like, Noah's flood is going to be repeated, tricking poor old John the carpenter into rigging these improvised lifeboats that he hangs from the ceiling of his house, and sleeps up there while Hendy, Nicholas, and Alisoun get busy down on the ground floor. And the lifeboats are like kneading tubs. They're farm implements. They probably smell of yeast and dough. So really down home, really not the place you want to survive the flood in, but it beats dying in the flood. I would point out a great moment of characterization after Handy Nicholas has laid out his complicated scheme, has kind of baited the hook, and first by making the carpenter's servant break down the door in language much like the miller has been described, is able to break down doors himself in the general prologue. There's a complicated loop back and forth between the frame story and the tales. He pretends to be in a trance. He pretends to have had this astrological prediction about the impending disaster of a global flood. And the first thing John says is, "Alas, me wife. Alas, my wife." Poor old man, who's heard the world is ending. Everything he owns is going to be drowned. His life is in jeopardy. But the first thing he says is, "My wife. How can I save my wife?" He's played for laughs, but he's also a sympathetic character. Alisoun is described at great length, and I'm going to leave the description of Alisoun for your optional passage analysis, your practice exercise at the end of Unit 1. I would ask you to go through and look carefully at all the particular things she is compared to. Look for the versification, look for the jokes, but also look for what the metaphors and similes are. As we said with the Miller, he is compared to things that are appropriate to his social station in life. This is very much true of Alisoun in the Miller's Tale. In fact, it's even more prominent. Where it ends up isn't she? She's a wonderful woman for any nobleman to lie in bed with. She'd be a great mistress for a nobleman, or a great wife for a yeoman. The upper working classes, she's so beautiful and so nice, she'd be a great wife for a prosperous working man, and a great one-night stand for a rich guy. It's right there. The classism is right there. And Hendy Nicholas is a trickster character who is here, one of the ways the Clerk of Oxenford is being mocked here. The Clerk of Oxenford gets off all right in the general prologue. He is a not corrupt philosopher, academic. Here we have a philosopher who's just a scam artist. But at the end, he gets paid too. The end is like he's the one. It's Nicholas who gets himself burned horribly in his nether eye, the lower eye. Not the inner eye. Okay, so the third eye, but the much lower third eye. I'd leave us with one moment. This is a story about three men who are all sexually and romantically in various ways, in a different balance, some more sexually, some more romantically, with the same woman, with Alisoun. And what do we hear from Alisoun? We hear her say, "Tee-hee," quoth she, and clapped the window shut, and clapped the door. She is someone who gets her butt kissed playing a joke on Absalom. And tee-hee, there's a sense there that actually, for all the attention these men are paying here, she's a fairly simple character, much simpler than the wife of Bath, who she's named after.